Hello students, today we will be discussing about the neo-liberal theory of international relations. Earlier we already discussed the classical theory of international relations. So, in this lecture we will be discussing the advanced version of liberal theory of international relations that we call as neo-liberal theory. We will be proceeding like this. We will focus on the background. The first is called the sociological liberalism. Second is called the interdependence liberalism. So, let us first start with the background of the neo-liberal theory of international relations. Although the beginning of the Cold War led to the ascendancy of the realist thought in international relations, liberal theory nevertheless attracted growing attention from the 1970s onwards. We already discussed how the end of the Second World War and the beginning of the Cold War that provided a fertile ground to the development of realist theory in international relations, and the liberal theory because of the outbreak of the Second World War, collapse of the League of Nations. It was a period that seriously undermined the idealist version of liberalism. Although some attempts were made to reformulate it in a different way, but the beginning of Cold War and the ideological rivalry between the two superpowers in a way made the realist theory in international relations more popular among the IR scholars and students. So, it basically evolved in a more realist version compared with both utopian liberalism, that was the inter-war period liberalism, and the classical liberal theory of the post Second World War period. So, it is a combination of what you can say the idealist version of liberal theory that was there in the interwar period, and classical liberal theory of international relations that was there in the just after the Second World War. So, it is an amalgamation of these two theories. The process of regional integration in Western Europe in the 1950s, trade and investment, travel and communication, and similar kind of issues in the relations between the liberal democracies of the West provided the basis for a new attempt by the liberals to formulate an alternative theory of international relations based on realist thinking that would avoid the utopian excess of earlier liberalism. So, basically the world was devastated after the Second World War. Mostly the countries of Western Europe like France, like United Kingdom, like Germany, and many other countries, they some were victorious, but economically they were in a very bad shape, and they needed a kind of economic assistance. They needed all kinds of assistance, and the United States because it used nuclear weapons against Japan, and it in a way influenced the end of the Second World War. So, it was not economically devastated, rather it was in a better economic position, and the whole concept of this Bretton Woods economic structure led by the World Bank and IMF, the kind of economic packages it provided to the countries of the Western Europe, kind of ideological rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union also forced the Americans to focus more on the countries of Western Europe and contribute for their economic development. So, these are the factors that led to a kind of more and more travel and communication, trade and investment opportunities, and that was limited to the advanced liberal democracies of the Western world, but to limited extent they were also providing the kind of economic assistance to the countries of the global south, because the Americans and the European countries, they were fighting a Cold War against the Soviet Union, and it is through economic assistance they wanted to at least get some countries to their fold. So, that was the kind of background that actually helped the neoliberalism to reformulate on the basis of the interwar liberalism of the earlier period and the classical liberalism that was there in the post Second World War period. This is called neoliberalism. Neoliberals share old liberal ideas about the possibility of progress and change, but they reject idealism because they think that they would formulate theories and apply new methods which are scientific. So, in a way, as I said, there were so many problems with idealist liberalism, there were so many problems with the classical liberal theory, because most of the arguments at that time were not very convincing because of realist theory popularized by Morgantho. So that was the reason, that was the background that led to the kind of liberalism that we call neo-liberalism, that was considered as more scientific, also because of the reason that there was behavioral revolution in international relations that in a way contributed for more empirical, more scientific theory of international relations, and the neoliberals were also influenced by the behavioral revolution in international relations. In short, the debate between liberalism and realism continued, but it was now colored by the post 1945 international setting and the behavioral methodological persuasion. So these two settings, particularly the post Second World War period, that led to massive USA investment in the economies of the Western European countries like France, like UK, like West Germany, which was divided between East Germany and West Germany. West Germany was aligned with the United States. East Germany was occupied by the Soviet Union. So so basically this kind of economic investment contributed for more and more exchanges, trade and commercial exchanges between United States and these countries of Western Europe, and also the behavioral revolution. These two factors greatly influenced the neoliberal theory of international relations. The neoliberalism has four variants. They are the sociological liberalism, interdependence liberalism, institutional liberalism, and republican liberalism, which basically focus on issues of democracy, international institutions, and economic interdependence, and seeks empirical evidence of their virtues and status in the pursuit of global peace, stability, and prosperity. So basically, we have four variants of neoliberalism, and these all combinedly focus on the issues of democracy, international institutions, and economic interdependence, because they think that these issues would actually greatly contribute for the betterment of global peace, stability, and prosperity. Now let us focus on sociological liberalism. The sociological liberalism came into being during the closing stages of the 19th century and continued to flourish the mid 20th century. Richard Cobden, Karl Dutch, and John Button are its main proponents, and they emphasize the impact of expanding cross-border activities such as higher level of trade, communication, cultural exchange between people, groups, and organizations belonging to different countries. So basically, we have main proponents of this sociological liberalism in the works of Richard Cobden, Karl Dutch, and John Button, who are particularly talking of the effect of this cross-border activities due to higher amount of trade, higher amount of commerce, and particularly the economic and cultural exchanges between people, groups, and organizations belonging to national governments, mainly to the mature liberal democracies of the Western world. They hold the notion that relations between people are more cooperative and supportive than relations between national governments. So these scholars, they were basically arguing that the kind of economic interdependence between these liberal democratic countries that was encouraging more and more people, groups, and organizations from different liberal democratic countries to move from this part to that part, and that kind of trade, communication, and cultural exchange, it actually helped for expanding the cross-cultural activities between these countries. They argue that transnational relations between people from different countries help create new forms of society which exist alongside or even in competition with the nation states. So this kind of relationship between the people, between the groups, between the organizations that have actually helped to build a kind of new form of human society that is there, and sometimes it is also in competition with the nation state. Cobden argues that interaction across the world can take place between different societies. According to this view, people and social groupings relate with one another and form networks across the globe among themselves around the world to support one another. So basically it was the argument of Cowden that people from different countries, they are forming a kind of grouping that is related to each other, and they also form networks that support these people during different period of time, and they are not limited to these countries only. Sometimes they were saying something, they were raising something that was beyond their border, that was beyond their own countries. It can lead to the formation of what Rojnu calls the global society. So we had already discussed international politics as a kind of state dominated or state centric politics. The global politics perspective that talks about international politics as a kind of society centric politics. So in this kind of arguments you can find the concept of global politics. Those who advocate about the society of the people, or it's a kind of global society. So this global society, though it's going to help each other, it's going to contribute for the betterment of each other, and sometimes the formation of this global society is not just limited to these global societies. These kind of networks, they are going to help themselves when they actually needed the support of each other. So that kind of situation we basically witnessed, or we basically discussed when we discussed about the society centric perspective of international relations. It can lead to the formation of what Rojnu calls global societies. These kind of people, social groupings, they are related to each other and they form networks among themselves to support each other, not just limited to their own countries, rather to the people of the other countries. So that was a kind of global society. We were discussing about this issue when we were talking about the global perspective of international relations. So that is the kind of development that happened because of more and more trade, more and more commerce, more and more social interaction. It was basically because of this, there was a debate on the global society rather than international society or society of states. Unlike the realist theory, which it considers too narrowly focused and one-sided, sociological liberalism points to the other actors other than the states in international relations. So we have already discussed how the realist theory considers states are the primary actors, and other actors, even if they are subservient, they are subordinate to the state. But the sociological liberals, they talk about this kind of view as one-sided. It's narrowly focused because there are other actors. Sometimes they play very important role in international politics because of their growing influence. Sociological liberalism puts forward the idea of transnationalism. Private groups and societies are important agents of international politics, and they help states to achieve their objectives in international relations. So there are so many social groups, there are so many powerful groups in international society, international politics, those who form networks, those who substantially contribute for the working of international relations. You have Amnesty International, you have Transparency International. They not only play an influential role in international politics, sometimes they also contribute for countries' national objectives. Particularly I am talking of the Western advanced countries. So in a way, these networks, these groupings, they have become an important part of international politics. Karl Dutch introduced the idea of security community. It means that regular interaction among people can lead to the development of a community feeling among themselves, that their conflicts and problems can be resolved without recourse to large scale physical violence. So Karl Dutch basically talked about this security community, where you have people of different countries who develop a kind of feeling among themselves that conflicts, problems, they can be resolved without thinking of war, without thinking of physical violence. So this kind of security community has become possible because of more trade, more interaction and more people to people contact. He lists a number of conditions that are conducive to the emergence of security communities, such as increased social communications, greater mobility of persons, stronger economic ties, and wider range of mutual human interaction. So these kind of activities that contribute the formation of security community, and you get a kind of we feeling, and if there is any problem, you respond and you support each other, you support mutually each other. So that is a kind of security community Karl Dutch is talking about. John Button in his book World Society proposes a cobweb model of transnational relationship to demonstrate how nation states consist of many different groups of people that have different types of external ties and different types of interest. So in this cobweb model of international relations, Button is talking of the kind of world politics, where there are different groups of people that have different external ties and also kind of interest. They have different interests, they have different ties, and these kind of interest, these kind of interactions actually influence the state to state interaction, and states are not just looking at politics, not looking just at military issues, rather their interactions are extended to other non-political kinds of interactions, and also interaction with these non-state actors, supranational actors, and these kind of groups. So in a way, this is influencing the working of international politics according to John Button. If we map the patterns of communication and transactions between different groups, we will get a more accurate picture of the world, because it would represent actual patterns of human behavior rather than artificial boundaries of states. So nowadays the artificial boundaries that is there to separate the states from each other. So Button is saying that these kind of interactions actually discouraging the kind of artificial boundaries, and because more and more people now like to move to other parts of the world, they want to interact with different communities. You go for different regions, maybe for employment, maybe for other economic opportunities, maybe for medical treatment, maybe for tourism. So there are enough number of regions for which you move from this part of the world to that part of the world, and that kind of interactions, that kind of activities actually discourage any kind of rigid boundaries that we earlier understood or earlier we focused. James Rosenow in his work further developed this concept of sociological liberal approach, and particularly he talked of transnational relations and sees a profound transformation of the international system that is underway. So Rosenow is particularly focusing on the transnational relations that in a way is affecting the working of international relations. The state-centric anarchic system has not disappeared, but a new multi-centric world has emerged that is composed of diverse sovereignty-free collectivities which exist apart from and in competition with the state-centric world of sovereign bound states. So Rosenow is particularly talking of a multi-centric world which consists not just of sovereign states, rather there are many groups, those who compete with the state-centric model of the world, and these groups, they are playing a very important role in deciding the global agenda, in formulating the global agenda, and also in implementing the global agenda. So state-centric model is there, so it is not replaced by the non-state groups, transnational actors, but we should know that these groups have become important like the state in deciding the global agenda, writing the global agenda. In some, sociological liberalism believes that overlapping interdependent relations between people are bound to be more cooperative than the relations between the states, because states are exclusive and their interests do not overlap and cross-cut. A world with a large number of transnational networks will thus be more peaceful. So the main argument we can summarize of the sociological liberalism is that the overlapping kind of interdependent relationship between the people is generally cooperative. So in that way you can say the people of Pakistan and the people of India, they are more cooperative than the state of India and state of Pakistan, right? Because there are so many cultural similarities, there are so many historical affinities, there are so many other kinds of similarities, so you can't deny. So most of the time you find that because of media, because of politicians, because of structural compulsions, the countries are fighting. But if you go to Europe, if you go to America, you find Pakistanis are more cooperative with the Indians, or they look like Indians, their culture is more or less similar to you. So you don't find any difference between the Pakistanis and Indians in Europe, in America. Rather you feel to talk to them, you feel comfortable in interacting with them, and that is how you find a different kind of model than the state to state relationship, which may be because of structural reasons, because of historical reasons, they may compete against each other, but the people to people contact, people to people interaction, that is much more important, and that we cannot deny, and in a way that is there along with the state model kind of international politics. The liberal theories about interdependence are grounded in ideas about trade and economic relations. Sometimes it is also called commercial liberalism. Such thinking can be traced back to the birth of commercial liberalism in the 19th century based on the ideas of David Ricardo, a very reputed economist, and the Manchester liberals. So, basically the idea of interdependence liberalism is influenced by the writings of David Ricardo and also the ideas of the Manchester liberals. Free trade has economic benefits as it allows each country to specialize in the production of goods and services, the one in which they have a comparative advantage. So, basic argument is if you allow free trade, if you allow countries to produce and sell goods and services, that has more and more economic benefits, and also those countries who have comparative advantage in one area, they will get an opportunity to produce that, and in a way they will contribute for the global economic development and prosperity. So, one basic reason for this economic kind of interaction is that it allows you to specialize one particular area in which you have comparative advantage. However, free trade is important in drawing states into a wave of economic interdependence. That means that the material cost of international conflict are so great that warfare becomes virtually unthinkable. So, if you trade more and more with other countries, definitely that not only produces a kind of interdependence, which is of course good, but also it demotivates you to start a military conflict with that country, because it may be economically costly to you. So, that is how the interdependence liberalism emphasizes on more and more trade, more and more economic exchanges. The stress on interdependence that is basic to commercial liberalism has been further developed by neoliberals into what Cohen and Nye say complex interdependence, a far more friendly and cooperative relationship between states. So, this initial idea of economic liberalism was further developed by Cohen and by Nye, and they call it as complex interdependence. Basically, they are talking of how this complex interdependence is producing more and more friendly and cooperative relationship between and among the sovereign states. They argue that post-war complex interdependence is qualitatively different from the earlier and simple kinds of interdependence. So, they make a distinction between complex interdependence and the earlier kind of interdependence that the other scholars were talking. Earlier, high politics of security and survival had priority over the low politics of economics and social affairs. So, we have already discussed that in the context of realist theory, that they made a distinction between domestic politics and international politics, and they always given priority to the high politics of security, of military security, and they have not given enough attention to the low security issues like environment, like trade. So, this interdependence liberalism is thinking in a way that combines the low politics and also the high politics. So, you can't make a distinction between this kind of division or this kind of low politics and high politics, because each of these two areas, they influence, they are closely interrelated to each other. Under conditions of complex interdependence, there is no longer the case for two regions. So, this kind of high politics and no politics you cannot maintain for a long period of time, because there are so many reasons for that. First, relations between states nowadays are not only or even primarily relations between state leaders. There are relations on many different levels via many different actors and branches of government. So, it is not just a state to state relationship. Nowadays, there are different kind of relationship between non-state actors, supranational actors, transnational companies, people to people relationships. So, this is a kind of, as I said, it's a kind of web, cobweb type of relationship. So, this is the reason why you cannot make a distinction between the domestic issue or an international issue or low politics and high politics. Second, there is a lot of transnational relations between individuals and groups outside the state. So, it is not that within the domestic politics individuals are united on economic issues and social issues, rather you will find that these kind of issues have also contributed for what we discussed about this security community, a kind of we feeling among the people who consider themselves as global citizens, and that is the reason why military force is less useful instrument of policy under condition of complex interdependence. So, because of this military security has in a way, I should not say it has lost its importance, but we do consider military security as important, but at the same time we also consider other things as important, because economics, trade and cultural issues, scientific achievements, your culture, your history, your thinking, your vision, everything has become now important. So, you can't just think of military security, because if you think only in terms of military security, you will face the consequences as other countries who are militarily powerful are facing the music. So, that is again the problem. Finally, under complex interdependence, states become more preoccupied with the low politics of welfare, environmental protection, and less concerned with the high politics of national security. So, because of these reasons, the states are now more and more concerned about the low politics issues. They are thinking of their welfare, they are thinking of demographic decline, they are thinking of social issues, they are thinking of economic welfare of their citizens. So, they are not much more concerned about their military security, because of this complex interdependency between the states and the non-state actors. Interdependence liberals are thus more balanced in their approach than some other liberals, because everything has changed for the better, and the world of violent conflict, unbridled state power, and the dictatorship of the national interest is gone forever. So, according to Cohen and Nye, this kind of complex interdependence has brought so many changes in the world, because now we are not living now in a world characterized by more and more violence, unbridled state power, and dictatorship of national interest. We do give importance to these issues, but at the same time these are not the only issues for which states are thinking. States are formulating their foreign policy. They are looking at economic issues, non-economic issues, cultural exchanges, people to people contact. So, all issues have become important. So, because of this reason, Cohen and Nye, they think that this kind of situation is actually going to contribute for better global security, better global peace, and better global prosperity. However, in adopting the middle of the road position, interdependence liberals face the problem of deciding exactly how much has changed, how much remains the same, and what precise implications are the changes mean for international relations. So, of course, we will recognize, we will acknowledge that the world has changed since the Second World War, since the First World War, there is no doubt about it, but what kind of change has taken place, how much change has actually taken place, and this is going to affect the working of international politics, international relations in future. That is again a question that is still debated, that is still contested. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. We discussed that the neoliberal theory attracted growing attention from 1970s onwards, as it evolved into a more realist version compared to both utopian liberalism and classical liberal theory of the post Second World War period. The neoliberals share the old liberal ideas about the possibility of progress and change, but reject idealism to formulate new theories and apply new scientific methods. Neoliberalism has four main variants: sociological liberalism, interdependence liberalism, institutional liberalism, and republican liberalism. The sociological liberalism argues that increased transnational interactions and social connections between individuals, groups, and organizations across borders can lead to greater cooperation and peace in international relations. It emphasizes the significance of non-state actors and informal networks in fostering mutual understanding and reducing the likelihood of conflict, suggesting that the wave of interdependencies created by these social interactions can transform the nature of international politics. The main argument of interdependence liberalism is that the increasing economic and political interdependence among the nation states reduce the likelihood of conflict and promote cooperation. By emphasizing the mutual benefits of trade, investment and other forms of international exchange, interdependence liberalism suggests that states are incentivized to maintain peaceful and cooperative relations to sustain the advantages derived from their interconnectedness. Thus, while sociological liberalism focuses on the role of transnational social connections and interactions among the non-state actors, interdependence liberalism, on the other hand, emphasizes on the economic and political interdependencies between the nation states. We will discuss about institutional liberalism and republican liberalism in our next lecture. Thank you for your attention. Thank you once again.